So you have all the supplies. They're so pretty and perfect. You've watched a zillion tutorials, but you're nervous about diving into a full-blown painting because let's face it, you've never tried this before. You have all the questions. Which color? Did I buy the right paper? How do I hold the brush? And yeah, I see you. I see you so hard. Today, we're going to paint together. Yep, that's right. We're going to get those paints messy, those brushes dripping, and in a few minutes' time, you'll have your very first watercolor done and done. This painting will do a really good job at crushing your watercolor fears. All right, no pressure. Nope, not one bit. Okay, so there's one more thing before we start. This painting is meant to combat the one thing that stops so many of us in our beginner tracks, and that's never starting. This painting is going to be a mess, but it will be fun. This painting will feel like a roller coaster ride of emotions, but it will help you fall in love with watercolor. This painting will change you forever. All right, let's go. In terms of supplies, you're going to use what you have. I'm going to be using what I have and what I love. It's not important that our supplies match up. Today's layout is going to be a little bit more of a square, so you might want to mark out a really simple square on the paper that you're using if you want to paint along exactly with me. Get that palette out and let's spray it down. If you don't have a spray bottle, you can just grab your brush and add a drop of water to each well. Give those wells about 30 seconds to soak in that water and grab your brush. I am using a number 6 round and I'm going to press and create a curved mark. It's going to be about 4 inches long. I know that's big. Fill up your brush with another green and make the same kind of mark but on the other side. And then fill up that brush again and fill in the middle. This is a wet on dry technique and you've just made a big old leaf. Now I want to point out something. This brush, this number 6, and probably whatever brush you have, unless it's really large, is probably going to feel like it's too small to do what you're doing, but that is on purpose. And here's why. Load that brush up with green again, friends, and create a stroke going straight up to the top of your paper. And as you create that stroke, you're going to press down, press a little bit harder in the middle of the stroke, and then start to lift off to create a thinner stroke as you go up. Get some water, a little bit more paint on that brush as you need it to fill in the middle. And then draw a stroke right down from the bottom middle of that leaf that you created and connect it with the other leaf, the first leaf you painted. Now I want you to watch me paint that last leaf again. I'm going to repeat it. But friends, I want to say this. It might feel like this brush, if you're using something similar to mine, is a little too small for what you're doing, these big leaves, right? But that's by design, because if you can paint these leaves with a brush that's a little bit too small, imagine what you can do with the perfect brush for the perfect size leaves. Yep, using the most imperfect materials is just going to make you a better painter, and it's going to give you more confidence faster. Moving on to the third leaf, and we're going to use a different technique. It's one of the basics of watercolor called wet on wet. So draw your leaf with the same brush with some clean-ish water. That's right. Do the same exact thing as the last 2 leaves, but instead of using paint, you're going to use water. And then you can dab in color and watch it explode, and then use your brush to move it around within the confines of that water leaf you just painted. And as we paint today, I don't want you to be too picky or put too much thought into exactly the color that you're choosing. And definitely don't want you to be mixing too much or at all on your palette. Just pick up color and let it happen. I grabbed a little bit of blue on my brush with a little bit of green that was already there and created a thin stroke going from the center where all these leaves connect all the way up to the tippy top of the third leaf I just painted. And then I did a little bit of that same kind of stroke to connect with the second leaf we painted. Basically, I'm just adding veins to the second and third leaf that we painted. If you feel like you need a break, pause the video, take a breath, take a beat. It's okay. This is overwhelming. This is your first time. These are all the feels you're supposed to be feeling. All right, let's load up that brush with green again. You're going to come out to the right of where all 3 of those leaves meet, that stem, and you're going to create a serpentine curve. You're going to press, drag, wave, and lift. And you're going to create additional strokes. Load your brush in between whatever color, green, blue, purple, whatever you want, and create the same stroke again and again. They're going to be longer at the bottom, wavier at the bottom, and then as you go up towards that third leaf we painted, you're going to make them shorter. So this is going to look a little bit like a fern coming out of the right-hand side of this spray of leaves. One of the things that I encourage you to do as a super duper beginner is to pick up different shades of the same color every time you go back to your palette. So if you had an olive green on your brush at the start, dab a little blue into your brush without rinsing and paint with it. See what happens. You don't have to go back to the page with the same color green, the same color pink, and on as you go. Pick up a different color and it makes things a lot more interesting on the page. Moving on down to the bottom left of this spray of leaves, and if you haven't guessed it by now, this is kind of an imaginary spray of leaves. Does it really exist in real life? No, but that makes it more interesting. We're going to draw another leaf with our brush. So one big wavy wiggly stroke and press harder in some areas as you're dragging down towards that bottom right corner, and repeat that and then fill in the middle again. Now remember I said that you're using kind of a small brush for the task on purpose. So you're gonna have to reload your brush more often with water and pigment to kind of fill in these big leaves. So don't feel nervous if you're like, oh my gosh, the paint isn't lasting and I don't know what to do. This is exactly where you're supposed to be. And while you're at it with that big old leaf at the bottom right, feel free to add some interesting colors. I added a little bit of peach as I was filling in, a little bit of blue here, and look how interesting it makes that leaf look. And we're not getting too realistic with this painting today, but by adding these interesting colors, some darker, some lighter, some unexpected, I'm drawing some lines here from the base of the leaf up towards the top of the leaf over and over again, kind of following the contour. Just makes for a more interesting leaf, and you're getting to know your watercolors really well right now. Let's head up to the top right corner and create a smaller leaf. Now this is a leaf that's appropriately sized for this number 6 round brush that I'm using, and you're creating one stroke curved and then another stroke on the other side of like an imaginary center, and then fill in the middle, adding some additional colors. I'm actually adding a little brown here, and I'm connecting my 3 leaves with thin strokes with whatever color is left on my brush. You've probably noticed by now, and I've mentioned it a couple times, when you press down, you're gonna get a thicker line, and when you use light pressure, you're gonna get a thinner line. So these different marks that we're doing are on purpose, so you get to know not only your new paints, but your new brush. And if you're not getting that thin line that I'm getting, don't fret. Play around with the pressure, practice a little bit more, and you'll get more comfortable, and you will get those thin lines. That bottom left corner is looking empty, friends, so we're headed down there. Reload your brush, whatever green you're loving, and another big curved mark, and you're going to repeat it again underneath with the white in the middle, and then get some water on that brush and fill in again. I'm adding a little pink because I'm feeling frisky. I do love that, and I have to get more water in there because this leaf is big again. And some blue and darker green on there, working from the point of that leaf upwards, and I'm adding some darkness underneath on the underside of the leaf. And then I'm taking what's left on my brush and I'm finally adding kind of a big stalk, and I'm just dabbing some short strokes in underneath where all of this green leafy stuff meets. And I'm finally making a stalk that connects it all. And it's just a bunch of lines that are horizontal in nature that are ascending in size as I go down towards the bottom of the page. Now, grab a dark green, whatever you've discovered you love so far. If you only have one green on your palette, mix that green with a little bit of red, maybe a little bit of purple and some blue, and you're gonna have a nice dark green, and you can go in and make some veins in your leaves. If you have more water on your brush, I did have more water on my brush with that second leaf there that I added some veins to. my lines got thicker and started to diffuse with that water. If you have less water on your brush, you're going to get those nice, thin, crisp lines. Going down to the bottom left here and adding some detail with a darker blue, but that leaf is still wet, so notice those lines again, they're diffusing and getting softer. I'm not getting that crisp look that I got with the middle leaf at the top. I have some dark brown on my brush here. Maybe a little blue is in there too. I'm going to add a few strokes for definition and dimension. Friends, I'm going to replay some of the last few moments of footage while I mention this. This is scary stuff, right? You've invested in all these supplies. You've never done this before. You know what? If you have done this before and you just thought this was interesting, I'm so glad you're here. But really, this is for the super duper uber beginner. You're supposed to feel uncomfortable. The magical part of this kind of uncomfortable, watercolor uncomfortable, is that it's laced with joy. It's laced with an immediate feeling of freedom. And that is what you're feeling right now. And I hope you're loving it. So let me know in comments. Put the brush down. Let me know in comments if you're feeling it a little bit, even just a little bit. Say, I feel it. Head to comments. Let me know. And if you're getting something out of this video and you're feeling inspired, I would love if you give this video a boop. That's a like. That means that other people can find this channel easier, and I appreciate it so much. Let's head back into the painting. Now you can notice if there are some leaves that are still damp. You usually can tell just by looking, or you could dab your finger in lightly, a clean finger. Notice any leaves that are still damp. You can still add color to those. This is your opportunity. I always say the wet page is an opportunity. So if you feel like dabbing in some peach or pink or red or whatever, getting crazy, now's the time to do it. All right, this is your moment. This is your potty break moment. Take a deep breath moment. We're gonna let this bad boy dry completely and come back to it. Depending on the type of paper you're using, it's gonna be dry completely, indefinitely, like a half hour, maybe less. We're heading into phase 2 of this painting, and I want to say this. If you're loving what you've created and you're nervous about messing it up, I want you to be brave and bold and go into this second part with me. If you want to take a photograph first, hey, maybe you have a scanner. Go ahead and scan what you've done so far, just in case you create something in the next step that you don't love. But I want you to be brave, and I want you to power through and do it with me. We're going to add a background, and we're going to use the same number 6 round brush. And it is, yes, going to feel a little bit too small for what we're doing. But remember, that is teaching you something. All right, take some clean-ish water. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you're going to start by filling in that top left corner. Fill it all in with water. As you come close to any green areas, the leaves that you've been painting all this time, I want you to stay a little bit away from them. So you're creating like a little white margin wherever you're coming close to the painted green areas with your brush. And then fill in with water. Fill it in. Get that nice and wet. You don't want puddles, but you want to see a little bit of a sheen on the paper. That's how you'll know the paper is wet enough. Then grab your favorite blue, your favorite pink, whatever your favorite color is in the whole wide world. And grab that from your palette, nice and juicy, load up that brush with lots of color, and dab a few dots into the wet paint. And then you're gonna spread that paint around with your brush. If you feel like you have too much paint on your brush, rinse it a little bit and come back and continue to dab and fill in that area that you just wet carefully with your favorite color. And this is basically what we're going to do. We're going to fill in this entire background, working left to right, and before you know it, we're going to have the coolest background painted into your imaginary leafscape. Moving to the right, I'm filling in this middle area with water. Now, a tip for you, when you're in the tight areas where there's not a lot of white space, not a lot of room to move, just use a lighter touch and go slower, and you'll be fine. It's good, you're fine, we got this. And even if you bump into your leaves with your wet brush, or heaven forbid, with the color that you choose to paint on top, who cares? It's all good. Remember, this painting is to get you comfortable with watercolor, not to produce a masterpiece. Moving to the right again, filling in as I go. My water's getting more blue, so my clean water that I'm painting in with first is definitely not clean anymore, but it's okay. Don't worry, you're in the joy zone. Don't get up to change your water. You don't need to. Just keep going. Here's a couple of things to remember as you work through the rest of the background space and fill it with lovely watercolor. Number 1, your water doesn't have to be perfectly clean. Number 2, if you're trying to get that brush into some tight spaces, remember, use light pressure. Heavier pressure is going to give you a thick line and you're going to feel like your painting's starting to get a little messy. Number 3, when you're starting to dab pigment into the damp surface of the paper, you might want to start with a little bit of a less is more mentality because it's a lot easier to add pigment than it is to remove too much pigment. Number 4, as you continue working into the white spaces of your background, wetting the paper and then adding pigment, remember those previous spaces that you were painting might still be damp and you could still dab in some contrasting colors to see what happens. And number 5, you may want to respray your palette because if those paint pans have dried up a bit, you're going to have a harder time releasing the color and getting it onto your brush. All right, friends, we're finishing up this last section on the right-hand side. How are you feeling? Let me know in comments. Are you completely stressed out? Do you feel a little bit of that joy laced into your stress, or are you just loving this? Let me know which emotion you're feeling so we can talk about it. And while you're at it, if you feel like this video really helped you along in any way with your watercolor journey, I would love it if you'd give it a boop. Yep, that's a like, friends, and it helps others find this channel. And I'm pretty passionate about watercolor, so I want others to find this community here because you all are awesome. Now that you're feeling a little more confident, and I hope you are you feeling more confident? Okay. Next, you need to watch my watercolor masterclass because a lot of the techniques that I used in this video, I'm going to go into more depth and show you even more techniques that are going to take you to the next level on this crazy watercolor ride. Until next time, happy painting.